Hi, welcome to our presentation. Today we're going to talk about a comparative analysis of the Austrian and Belgian media system. And let's jump right in. So just a quick simple introduction. Helen Massini considered both countries to be part of the democratic corporatist model, which basically means that both countries are supposed to score high in all four dimensions of the media system. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to take a look if that is actually the case.
The first dimension that is mentioned is structure of media markets. So basically how media is consumed and how it is produced. The first variable we're going to look at is circulation rates. So in Austria, for example, there are about 2 million daily copies that are produced. This includes both the regional and the national newspapers. And if we look on Belgium, on the other hand, there are about 1.2 million to this day, which suffered a sharp decrease from the past, from the 60s, where it was about 2.5 million. This is mostly due to the French-speaking part, which its circulation rate dropped from 1.4 million to 330,000. If you compare it to the Flemish part, they only decreased from about 300,000, from 1.2 million to 900,000. The second variable we're going to look at is gender differences in newspaper reach. So if we take Austria, we see that 68% of men use the internet for news purposes only, compared to 60% in women. If you compare to Belgium, for them there are a smaller difference, which is of about 5%, being 68% of men using the internet for news compared to 63% of women using the internet for news.
Okay, so now for political parallelism. So first off, it is important to note that in Belgium, the country does not really speak Belgium. There is no real language for that. Is that you have three different communities. You have the French-speaking community, you have the Dutch-speaking community, and you have a smaller German-speaking community. And what we have found is that the Belgian media landscape actually reflects these linguistic divisions instead of political structures necessarily. Of course, there's still a certain degree of political parallelism as the different language communities have different political viewpoints on average, but still, it's not as strong as you would maybe expect from a democratic corporatist country. On the other hand, we have Austria, which to our findings has a really, really high degree of political parallelism. And this stems from the way media outlets in Austria generate the revenue. Large parts of the revenue are generated through advertisements, and the institutions in Austria that have the most budget for advertising are usually political parties. So that leads to political parties advertising in newspapers, and these newspapers being dependent on these ads. So therefore, they refrain from too critical reports on the parties that are basically sponsoring them. So that actually led to the downfall of Sebastian Kurz, who wasn't quite content with his PR budget and instead used tax money to pay for even more ads and for even more favorable portrayal. Contrary, on the other hand, the Belgian parties actually did not really invest as much into advertisements in newspapers, but rather put their efforts into promoting their programs on TikTok, according to the Reuters Institute.
Our third dimension is professionalization. Both countries enjoy a high degree of professionalization with a free press where no censorship is allowed. The journalists in Belgium are stated to be slightly more educated compared to other countries. However, the Austrian government really supports their journalists by giving them subsidies for better education and training. Both countries also have certain laws that the media has to adapt. These are laws that regulate content, but they also protect the journalists, right? In Belgium, for example, journalists have to follow the Belgian Code of Journalistic Ethics, which articulates the importance of ethical codes. But the laws in Belgium are often seen as ambiguous because the laws ensure certain press rights for journalists, but journalists are also being increasingly targeted for lawsuits and they have become subject to violence. In Austria, there was a Media Act introduced, which also contains ethical codes for journalists, such as including opposing viewpoints in media, but the media was also required to disclose their ownership. So overall, the degree of professionalization in both countries are seen as high because journalists have a lot of autonomy in what they write. They do have to follow certain professional norms, but these norms also make sure that the media is focused on the public and provides them with diverse media content.
As we already said, both Austria and Belgium are part of the democratic cooperative system, and this is also true concerning the role of the state. So that means that in both countries you have a very strong presence of the government. So a lot of laws, a lot of subsidies, a lot of tax breaks, a lot of legislations, but not like in other democratic cooperative countries. You also have a lot of clientelism. So as a reminder, what is clientelism? It is the exchange of goods and services in exchange for political support. Both countries also have a very long history of public broadcasting. So in Austria, we have the ORF that was created in 1955. Right now, because of the current government, we have a bit less subsidies than before, but still, we have a very big welfare view of the media. And on the other side, Belgium, with the NIR that was created in 1930, and that was based on the system of the BBC. So in both countries, we really see the media as a social necessity rather than a business entity. But that does not mean that they work the same, of course, especially in Belgium, because of all these linguistic groups that we already talked about. So the Dutch-speaking people, the French-speaking, and the German-speaking communities. We have a very divided media landscape, and basically we have a regional public broadcasting instead of national public broadcasting that's going to be funded by the regional governments instead of the federal ones. So we have the VRT in Flanders, we have the RTBF in Wallonia, the French-speaking side, and we have the BRF in the German-speaking community.
To sum all of that up, this pretty much means that Austria scores high in all four dimensions of the media market. Belgium, on the other hand, has a significantly lower newspaper circulation than Austria. And also, when it comes to political parallelism, the country seems to reflect the linguistic divisions more than the actual political structures. So in conclusion, Austria is really a prime example for a democratic corporatist country, while the same cannot quite be said for Belgium. Thank you for your attention.